Hi everyone, welcome to another G News update. It's good to be back with you again. Well, today there's been some shocking developments when the Prime Minister of New Zealand revealed on Facebook that his summer playlist was to be made public, and he wanted everybody in the public to actually give him some recommendations for songs that should be on his summer playlist. Now, this photograph he put up on his Facebook account reveals basically that Christopher Luxon is in Auckland, and it's pretty clear that he's staying at his holiday house in Onitangi on Waiheke Island. Now, that's actually something that locals have reported to G News yesterday, saying, well, like, he's actually there. But it's not the kind of thing that we tend to focus on, because everybody's entitled to a holiday and a bit of privacy. So it's just that it's public news now because everybody knows it. And he's actually basically come out and done this. But what was shocking was the reaction up and down the country, from the top of the island down to the bluff, because New Zealanders have actually been watching some pretty serious traumatic events happening on the world stage, and Christopher Luxon has been absent. He's been totally silent. We've actually had Helen Clark actually stand up and be something more like a leader here, and Winston, as you know, was late, and it was a pretty weak statement made by the New Zealand government. So New Zealanders have been sitting going, where is Luxon? Where is Luxon? Until Radio New Zealand came out and said, well, he's not overseas, he's in Auckland. But now we know he's actually just lounging around down at Onitangi Beach. And he's actually worried about his playlist. Now, this would actually be pretty shocking if it was just the case that this was about Trump kidnapping the head of state, and the Prime Minister of New Zealand being completely absent and not making any comment. But it was made worse because over the last 24 hours, there's been a firefighters union, professional firefighters union strike for 1 hour on Friday from 12 o'clock to 1 o'clock. And at 7 minutes past midday, there was a fire that burst out in Cortina Place in Pakuranga. And there was a whole lot of leaping to politicise this by two politicians in the government. The first is this statement here on social media by Van Velden, who said that the unions were somehow gambling with the lives of the public by taking strike action at all. And then there was Simeon Brown, who went from being angry and then escalated to being furious that any kind of strike action should ever take place for our firefighters across the country. The reaction to this was reasonably swift, because today the Professional Firefighters Union Vice President, Martin Campbell, released this. Here's a clip from this video. It's just a screenshot from the Auckland Central Fire Station. And basically, this is the busiest station in New Zealand. And they kind of handle about 6,000, something like that, call-outs every year. And what's happening with the fire service is that the government has neglected it and is turning a blind eye to the real problem facing all of us, while our firefighters are put into situations which are very, very dangerous for them. They're very heroic. And New Zealanders would like to see their tax money spent on things like keeping each other safe, turning up to a fire, being able to put out the fire, having the equipment that you need, having enough firefighters to do the job to cover the areas that we're in. But the government doesn't care about those lives of all of us, and prefers to spend your tax dollars on things like ingratiating their donors. Maybe the landlords out there got a big kickback at the expense of our firefighters, for example. And it goes on, you know, Big Tobacco gets money, but not our firefighters. And we've got a situation today where the government is doing things like cancelling their training programs to bring on new recruits just to save a few bucks so they can pay off their donors. And we've also got a situation where we're seeing this attack on any kind of collective action from the people, which is the unions, and the attack from the government on the people is really pissing people off all over the country. And people are speaking out from the top of the North Island to the south, like I said before. Now, this outrage that's going on isn't actually even being covered, really. So when Martin Campbell, he's the vice president in the clip here, spoke out and said, look, we just want the politicians to go back to Wellington and do their job instead of telling us to do ours. If you look into what had been going on, there's something like about, I don't know, something like 75% of all the calls are handled by career firefighters, but a huge amount, over 80% of our firefighters are volunteers, people that just step up and do the job anyway. So we're always going to have a mix, and the mix at the moment is out of whack, and that's affecting things. And of course, the unions have been very, very careful and don't want to go on strike. But what's actually happened is they've only gone on strike for 1 hour. And as I mentioned, suddenly a fire bursts out, and these politicians, Brown and Van Velden, Brown in particular, are kind of using a big stick to attack the unions rather than doing their job and providing a well-resourced and properly funded fire service and emergency service for all New Zealanders. And every New Zealander, whether you are an ACT or a national voter, agrees. This is wrong. This is really, really bad, and it really needs the Prime Minister to step in and give Van Velden and Simeon Brown a good clip around the ears, slap about the face and say, look, come on, do your job. Stop attacking the unions. But of course, Christopher Luxon, he doesn't see it that way, doesn't he? He's so disconnected. That's why, you're seeing this. The summer playlist comes out while all this is happening, and he's completely out of touch, and he has no idea how people feel. That he feels that people love him, like him, want to do trivial things. Now, admittedly, it's a Saturday. People are entitled to a day off. People, there's nothing wrong with saying, here's my list of songs. But in that context and in that job, the Prime Minister is goofing off, whether it's a Saturday or a public holiday or anything like that, when big events like, the kidnapping of Maduro happens with Trump, or when, their lives are being risked by these politicians like Simeon Brown and Van Velden, who will not support our fire service, who won't help them increase their staff or fund their resources, and all that equipment is broken down and the maintenance isn't looked after because they're trying to save money to either do sort of payments to their donors or to do this kind of ideological austerity cutbacks and cuts, and at the expense of all our public services. And I think you all know by now, whether you're a national voter, whether you're an ACT voter, that that's the case, that they're actually risking our lives. So it's an outrage, and it doesn't matter if it's a Saturday. So those are the kind of topics that are in the newsfare, if you like. But if you turn to the mainstream media, it's still on holiday. It's asleep. So let's just prove that. Let's have a look at a couple of pages from mainstream media. If you look at all the stories that are here on the Post's political page, you will find that they're very, very much not about anything to do with fire or fire services or anything to do with international events. In fact, they're more to do with things like old news, a day or two old, and all the dates don't really say much about anything happening today. In fact, most of the news services were just talking about how it's going to be a hot weekend, and boy, it's quite hot, which, when you care about climate change is probably to be expected, more so than most summers. So yes, we're actually seeing the Post hasn't really covered anything here on these topics. And when we look at Radio New Zealand, we see that everything's from the 9th of January, and today's the 10th. So there was no news at Radio New Zealand, and everyone went home and nothing was reported about these kind of events, as if they didn't happen. And Christopher Luxon didn't need to do anything or respond at all. So finally, let's have a look at the New Zealand Herald. The only article here on the political page for the New Zealand Herald that is dated today is an opinion piece from Fran O'Sullivan. And that actually tells you that Christopher Luxon, he's not going to appear back no matter what until the 19th of January. He's not returning for another 9 whole days. And as you know, during that period, New Zealand is playing against India in some cricket games, and basically you get the picture. Luxon's going to be goofing off at his beach house, pretending to be working at home and watching a bit of cricket, having a good old time. Meanwhile, we've got all these kind of issues like in Cortina Place, where businesses have been affected, where people have run down equipment, where volunteers always have to come and do the job of the firefighters in these kind of zones where they go on strike, and you get this politicisation. So people are outraged up and down New Zealand. People don't like this Prime Minister. They've had enough of this. Anyway, that's all I had to say today. This is just a brief update on the news today in New Zealand. I hope you have a good day, and we'll talk to you all again soon.
Welcome to G News, the good news.
Yeah, right.